welcome to Crime in Court. This is the state's case part 42 of California versus Erik and Lyle Menendez on trial in 1996 for their second trial for the homicides of Kitty and Jose, their parents. And we are picking up right where we left off. We are in the middle of Dr. McCarthy's testimony. He is the mechanical engineer talking about the bodily injuries, even though he's not a biomechanical engineer, which is the actual expert that should be on the stand right now. So I don't know how useful he is actually to the prosecution's case, but I mean, it is what it is. So here we are. We're in the middle of cross-examination with Ms. Abramson. So, but actually, we just went on a break. There was a recess. So let's get into looks like arguments. So please hit the like button and let's begin. All right, the court says the court is in session. Everyone is present. Ms. Abramson says, Your Honor, there is a question about whether this particular target pattern, which was made with a Winchester by the witness, was designated a number yesterday. It fell down and didn't wind up with a little yellow label. Is there a missing number? The court says, I noticed that it fell down. I couldn't see where it fell. It fell over by that doorway. The witness says it fell in the slot. Whatever slot, we don't know. The court says somehow it materialized and was up here this morning. I don't know how it got here. Maybe the cleaning crew? I don't know. The bailiff, Ms. Abramson says, the bailiff dematerialized it, Your Honor. So now it's missing again. The court says you started marking those Winchester patterns at the end. I don't think this one got marked. Why don't we just assign the next number to it? 293. Ms. Abramson says, I'm going to mark it and turn it over to the clerk. The reporter did locate the disputed question and answer. The court says, okay. The following record was read. Question. In the transcript that you read, answer. I can't say that the conflict, Ms. Abramson says, go to the previous one, I'm sorry. Question, but it's a factual record, is it not? For your reconstruction, what people say they did is a source of factual information, is it not? Answer, yes. But they have said what they did several different ways, which are in complete conflict. Question, in the transcript that you read? Answer, I can't say that there was a conflict in the transcript I read, but what they have said they did at various points in time, it is my understanding, is not controverted conflict. Ms. Abramson says, Now, Your Honor, both of his volunteering information outside the transcript were non-responsive to the question, and I ask that non-responsive answer be stricken and the jury be admonished to disregard them. The court says, all right, I will be glad to do that. The only question is doing it so that the jury would be aware of what is being stricken, and the answers would have to be read back for the jury, otherwise they won't know. Ms. Abramson says, there's no other way to do it. That's what you have to do. The court says, is that agreeable? Mr. Gessler says, I can't think of an alternative, so the answer is yes. The court says the alternative is I can strike them, and if there's reread of testimony, it won't be in the record. Mr. Gessler says, I'd prefer it be reread in spite of the danger that it causes, and then stricken so the jury specifically knows what to disregard. The court says, sure, I'll be glad to do that. Now the jury has entered the courtroom and the following proceedings were held. The court says, all right, the jury is back and will deal with an issue here that arose at the break. A couple of questions were asked of the witness and he gave answers. The answers went beyond the question, and therefore I'm going to strike everything that was non-responsive to the question, but we have to have the questions read by the reporter, and then I'll indicate what portion of the answer remains, and the rest of it will be stricken. You are to disregard that part that's stricken, so the reporter will read it back for you. The following record was read. Question by Ms. Abramson. But it's a factual record, is it not? For your reconstruction, what people say they did is a source of factual information, is it not? Answer, yes, but they have said what they did several different ways, which are in in complete conflict. Court says, hold on right there. The answer to that question was yes. Everything after that is non responsive to the question and is stricken, so you are to disregard it. Following record was read. Question by Ms. Abramson. In the transcript that you read, answer. I can't say that there was conflict in the transcript I read, but what they have said they did at various points in time, it is my understanding, is not controverted conflict. The court says the response to that question was, I can't say there was any conflict in what I read. Everything after that is non responsive to the question and is stricken, and you are to disregard the unresponsive portion. Okay, you may proceed. Ms. Aberson says, thank you, Your Honor. Dr. McCarthy says, I've put up on the easel some of the illustrations, okay? What's up on the easel first is what you've labeled Shot 1B. That is evidence exhibit 251. Can you see it, Dr. McCarthy, or do you need to tip it? He says, no, it's fine. I can see it. Hold on one second. Did I say that Dr. McCarthy said he put it on the easel? I don't know if I did or not. If I did, I'm sorry. So no, Ms. Abramson said, Dr. McCarthy, I've put up on the easel some of the illustrations that we're going to talk about. Can you see it, Dr. McCarthy? He says, no, it's fine. I can see it. Ms. Abramson goes on and says, in that particular illustration, the coffee table is represented as being at something of an angle vis-a-vis the couch, correct? Not much of one. Very, very slight, correct? Correct. The court says, what exhibit is what? Ms. Abramson says, this is exhibit 251, Your Honor. Now we're looking, are we not, at your shot 2B, which is exhibit 253, correct? Yes. And that shows the coffee table almost parallel. Yes. Now you don't believe anything moved the coffee table between shot 1B and shot 2. Let me strike that. You don't have any evidence to support the notion that anything changed the coffee table between 1B and 2B, do you? Between those two particular shots, no. So this is an artifact. The movement, I'm sorry, is that an artifact? The fact that angle changed slightly between 1B and 2B a computer mistake? I don't think it did. Perhaps it's a different perspective. Let me look again just to make sure. Ms. Abramson says, certainly, would you put 1B back up, Mr. Levin? Put 251 back up. Okay. Are you saying that the angle shown in 1B is the same as the angle in 2B? Why don't you step down? The witness says, I'm sorry, it's pretty close. I don't know there's a different angle. You're just looking at a perspective shift. You see how? And she cuts him off and says, why don't you do this, Dr. McCarthy? You're looking at a different angle here. So you see how these parallel lines converge? That is perspective that the computer computes. Then here you could see these two lines here, and there is an angle, but the convergence of this line is not the same perspective as on those lines. I'm not saying there isn't an artifact here, but it's small. If you look at the southern edge of the coffee table and you look at the western edge of the coffee table, it seems closer to the border line of the pattern. Yeah, than does the southeastern edge. And in fact, the tip here in 251, shot 1B, would put the eastern edge of the coffee table, no matter what the perspective, closer to the border than the western edge. Yes, I think you're right, because it looks like this pattern, this corner should have picked up this pattern line and may have picked up this pattern line. So he's pointing and illustrating on the exhibits as he's talking. So Ms. Amerson says that mistake is an artifact. It appears so. Good catch. So it's an artifact, he said in the last episode when he was on the stand with her, is basically a mistake, like it's a discrepancy. So it appears so. Good catch. Ms. Amerson says, you can take this one down. Now, let's look at shot 3B. That shows a much greater pitch to the angle of the coffee table than the preceding two did, does it not? Yes. And I would call your attention to this particular aspect to watch this little roundish aspect of the carpet pattern for the next few of these, correct? Okay. You can see where, from an overhead perspective, the southern edge of the coffee table intersects with that part of the carpet pattern. All right? Okay. What we just saw was 3B, which is 255, Your Honor. Now, moving 255, I'd like you to, Mr. Levin, if you can hold up 255. I know this is very difficult. Thank you. Now, what's below 255? Let me read the number below it. What's on the easel is 277, your shot 4B. What Mr. Levin is holding is 255, which is 3B. And this one suggests, does it not, an even greater angle to the coffee table? And the answer from the witness is greater angle and greater outward shift. Yes. So there's three different positions that the coffee table has been depicted in three different pictures so far. Okay, and did you illustrate any event that would have moved the coffee table, or is it another artifact? He says, no. This sequence, we have a couple of floor impressions, and I would have remembered this when we were talking the first time. We had a couple of floor impressions from the carpet where we can see when we blow up the photos in terms of what it looked like where the coffee table was at the beginning. It could have been there the night before or 2 nights before, but we just had the final position. So I didn't testify about the relative movement of the coffee table. All we know is we have these impressions in the carpet and we have these final positions. So we just incremented it over there. I want to point out too that Mary Louise Menendez fell. So, and she was right in between the coffee table and the couch. So she could have easily moved like her falling could have moved the coffee table, or her on the ground, if she was writhing around like they say she was, that could have moved the coffee table. Like any number of things could have moved the coffee table. Just because they have these like impressions in the floor from the gunshots doesn't mean that that's what moved the coffee table. Like, what are you talking about? But okay. She says, so you actually went off of something that was an impression in the coffee table, and it was the floor, and it moved it around as if it had been moved during the shooting, even though you don't know what happened. You don't know that that happened. We cannot testify that happened. We just know where it ends up. Just like an empty glass that once had food, you don't know when the food was eaten, do you? Correct. Let's go on then, noticing what now looks like a mushroom of that pattern at the south end of the coffee table. Yes. Let's move on to the next one, which is 5B. Mr. Levin, would you hold up 4B up again? It seems to have moved again. 5B, by the way, Your Honor, is 259. So we're now comparing 277 to 259. The table seems to have moved again. So it's now four different positions. Mr. Khan says objection, assumes facts, not an evidence. The court says overruled. The witness says no, I don't recollect there was an intention to move between those two frames. No. Ms. Abramson says this could just be a perspective problem. If you look at the increment here, then you look at the increment here, it's pretty close. It may be moved a little, perhaps, but very, very slight. So is that one of your intentional movements or an artifact? No, there shouldn't be. Any movement after she's down is an artifact. Take down 4B then. Now, I want you to shift. Well, 1 second. Would you pick up 5B for a second? Okay. For this one, to compare 259, which is 5B, with what's coming up, Dr. McCarthy, I would call your attention now not to the moving coffee table, but to the moving form of Mrs. Menendez. In 259, what you've called 5B, you have her body lying on its back, correct? Yes. You have the right leg rotated from the thigh outward so that the knee is now, I take it, under the coffee table somewhere or on the shelf of the coffee table. On the shelf of the coffee table. You, of course, don't know if her knee was in that position. As I testified, that's correct. But her left elbow seems very close to the couch in shot 5B, does it not? Yes, but again, as I testified, I can't position that limb for you. Well, you can't really position her body for me either at this point, specifically on the floor, can you? This is a position you took. We know, let me put it this way. I know from the fact that all the major blood stains from her are there, that she's in this location. But the exact location of her limbs, I can't tell you. Do you know she's in that location at the time that she received some shot because there's blood there? Correct? Well, I'm going to say all the major wounds because there isn't any major blood stains from her anywhere else in the room except that location. That's what your hypothesis is, correct? I think the photographs show. Well, whatever you think, that's your hypothesis, correct? Yes. Now, if you would move that, Mr. Levin, 259, so we now get to, hold it up if you would, we now get to 261, and now she's moved. Why is that? Again, you see she's moved to the north for some reason? I couldn't position her. As I indicated before, I can't tell you she's precisely in either position, so whatever it was more convenient for the artist to draw. As I indicated, I can't put her precisely at some position. So this is artistic license. The difference between 259 and 261, is that what you're saying? Well, I wouldn't call it artistic license, and that's exactly what it is. It's a detail that I cannot pin down precisely from the evidence. But you're taking artistic liberties to put the body wherever you want, and you're trying to depict the scene and the sequence of the shots in these diagrams. So her body positioning, the positioning of the table, all of it is relevant and important, and she has it's her duty to, ask this expert about it and break it down for the jury. Next question. She says, well, isn't it true that the reason this was done was because if you had had her in shot 5B in the position that she's in 6B, you wouldn't be able to show that injury that you're showing in 5B. It would have been hidden by the coffee table. So, for illustrative purposes, you just move the body around, right? I'm sorry. I must be slow. I didn't understand your question. What was so hard about that question? And to say he's slow on the stand? Okay. If the position of the dummy, which is all we're talking about, is an anthropomorphic dummy on a screen, if the position of the dummy on the screen that you have representing Mrs. Menendez had been farther north for 5B, you wouldn't have been able to see this. What you're trying to show is an injury to 5B. Hold on one second. Sorry. His answer is from this perspective, but I could have moved the computer. So you're saying there was no reason at all, therefore, for these bodies being in different positions between 5 and 6B, and no reason to cause it and no reason to control it. No reason to control it. So even if 3 months from now the jury is back there deliberating with these illustrations, which are not really accurate, that's okay? Objection, argumentative, which it is, sustained. Ms. Abramson says, would you take that back? Did you do this in order to confuse the jury, Dr. McCarthy? I hope these diagrams help them in understanding rather than confusing. So is that a no? I answered the question. Have you ever, in testifying as an expert witness, selected either an example, an exemplar, a chart, or a graph with the purpose of confusing a jury? Intentionally? Intentionally. No. We'll get back to that. Mr. Khan says, objection argumentative, Your Honor. Make a motion to strike that statement of counsel. The court says the last response of counsel is not a question, it is a remark that is stricken. The jury is admonished to disregard it. Ms. Abramson says, did you testify in a number of cases involving the automotive field that are called kid cases? I don't recollect a class of cases in the automotive field by that general. Well, isn't that a term that you and others use to describe cases in which young drivers have been injured or killed in all-terrain vehicles? Objection relevance motion under 352 to exclude. Overruled. We talk about cases involving consumer products and children generally as kids' cases. It was your automotive that I was trying to understand. So did you ever make the statement that you would use an example to confuse juries when you testify in kid cases? Objection, irrelevant, no foundation, hearsay. Overruled. The witness says no. Did you ever write that over an example of engine size of ATV, meaning all-terrain vehicle used? I wrote a comment concerning a diagram I feared plaintiffs' attorneys would use to confuse juries in kids' cases. Yes. Ms. Abramson says, and when you said in kids' cases, you were talking about ATV cases, all-terrain vehicle being automotive cases? It was in terms of the remark I believe you're referring to. So you've seen this before in other trials, haven't you? A couple others, yes. All right. So let me ask you right now if the handwriting that appears on the top of this document, I can't wait till she gets to this, this is getting juicy, which is at the top and it's entitled Draft Subject to Review and Revision, bottom of page 18. Is that your handwriting? Yes, it is. And did you write Bill? Objection calls for hearsay. Ms. Abramson says, were you writing over an engine size of ATV use chart? I was. And did you write Bill? Objection calls for hearsay. The court says, let me see it. Ms. Amerson says, would you like to see it, Judge? Witness says, Ms. Amerson says, excuse me, Your Honor. The court says, hold on a second. The court reads it. Okay. First of all, says the court, let the witness look at the entire document. Ms. Abramson says, certainly. Then she says, is the witness reading the document? The witness says, I have read the document. The court says, you may ask your question. Objection overruled. Nice. Ms. Abramson says, may I have the document? And did you write the following? Bill, I understand the purpose of this example and think it is instructive. However, this example will be used to confuse the jury when I testify in kid cases. Can we find an example that works the other way? That is, the gross number of higher than the single adjustant number. And then he says adjusted number. So he's correcting his own wording. She says, you wrote that? Uh-huh. The court says, is that yes? The witness says, yes, most definitely. Ms. Abramson says, now let's move on with what we're doing here. We now see this movement, and I believe the coffee tables moved here as well. Is that correct? Not much. A little. I'm not comfortable with that. It's so small, I would have to go back and check how it came out. The body is moved, however. Yes. Mr. Levin holding up 5B. Yes, and as I testified, you see her right leg is moved. Her right leg is moved, and you don't know how her right leg moved either. As I indicated, there's just no independent way I can reconstruct that. Now we're looking at 6B, where her body is. Now let's move on to the next one, which is 7B. Would you hold up 6B, Mr. Levin? 7B is 263, and we're comparing it now to 261. The coffee table moved again, hasn't it? Dr. McCarthy, I've lost count of how many times it moved. He says, no, I'm not comfortable. Oh, how about now? The fact that this shoulder, I'm sorry, we have the mushroom, and now we have another part of the carpet pattern that's showing that doesn't show here. Yes, but we're a little different angle. That's what I'm concerned about. Excuse me if I might. Well, you or whoever. The court says, let him finish what he was saying. Ms. Abramson says, okay. The witness says, in fact, the angle cuts the other way, so you're right. There's a small amount of movement there. Don't attach any significance to it. So she gets him to admit that, yes, it's yet again another discrepancy in the positioning of the coffee table or the bodies, with which everything keeps moving in these. Ms. Amerson says, well, the coffee table moved again. It's shown in a slightly different position. I don't believe the coffee table moved. Well, you just said it did. Okay. Not only does it show on 7B or suggest that the coffee table has moved forward, but somehow it suggests her leg has pulled out somewhat from under the table because there's more leg showing in 7B than 6B. No, as I specifically testified, I couldn't in this shot make any statement about where her limbs were, so I testified on direct. Do not attach any significance to that because there's no independent evidence of that at this point in time. I understand that. I'm not suggesting these things really happened. All I'm asking you is, isn't that what this illustration suggests? These movements that you don't know whether or not they happened. And I hope I was clear. He can't just say yes or no. And I hope I was clear on direct to indicate that that is not what I'm intending to suggest with these illustrations because I don't have independent evidence of that. But this merely shows this illustrating process is not totally accurate, correct? Well, the process is totally accurate, but what the illustrations indicate, I don't mean to represent were complete in every detail, accurate of what happened at that time. Go to the next one, please, Mr. Levin. Now we see in shot 7B, which is 263, can you visualize now where you have the dummy that's supposed to represent Mrs. Menendez on the floor? Yes. And why don't you move to the next one that I have up here, which is 10B? Mr. Levin, would you hold up 7B? Now, somehow, for 10B, the coffee table is moved back. Is that right? No, I don't think so. No? Here we are looking at a little different angle. If you look at how much of the face of the sofa is showing, you can see we're almost vertically down, but here we've got more of the face showing, and that means our perspective has moved over. As we move over, look at the end of the table, this detail, you'd be looking down at this angle. Do you understand what I mean? Oh, yes, I understand what you mean. I also understand that you got to choose the perspective, correct? Yes. Okay, now in choosing the perspective, you decided what position the bodies were, correct? Yes. And you decide when to move things like Mrs. Menendez's or Mr. Menendez's left leg as you represented it here, correct? Yes. And let me get your final position. Is 10B your final position of his feet? Should be. Let's make sure. 12B is your final illustration, period, right? Period, yes. And 12B, this little extended oval, that's supposed to be his foot, right? I'm sorry, ma'am, I couldn't see where you're pointing. This oval, this is supposed to represent a foot or a shoe. Approximately, yes. In fact, Dr. McCarthy, that really wasn't the position that his feet were in when he was found. Perhaps not exactly, but close. The only real position you can be absolutely certain of for Mr. Menendez and for Mrs. Menendez in every detail is the position in which they were found, correct? Yes. And the position in which Mr. Menendez was found was with each foot, both the left foot and the right foot, rotated out onto its outer edge, correct? Yes, more so than here. Well, rotated out on their outer edge and crossed right over left, correct? Yes. Now, you're not going to testify that those feet could have gotten crossed after death, are you? I. Let me do this. You're not going to testify that he crossed his feet after death. Correct. You know he can't do that. That's right. Now, do you believe that he could have moved at all after he received shot 2 to his head? Not on his own volition, no. But his body could have been moved by itself, whether volitionally or not. When he took the shot to the left leg, it certainly could have moved the leg somewhat. And after the shot to the head, before what you call the shot to the leg, could his body have moved itself? He could not. After the shot to the head, he could not have done volitional movement. Could he have done automatic movement? Could he, after death, have had catatonic action where his limbs failed? Yes, I just can't say. Well, you believe that can happen. There can be catatonic action while with flailing of limbs after death, correct? Yes. Now, I just want to establish a few other things here. You're not a blood spatter expert, correct? That's correct. You don't hold yourself out to be one. No. And in fact, you didn't try to analyze any blood spatter evidence in this case in order to determine the directionality of shots, correct? That's correct. And you're not even certain with respect to certain things appearing in the photographs whether they're blood spatters or blood drops or not, correct? There certainly would be certain things that I could not tell you that is correct. And did you ever bother looking at the photographs in order at all the photographs in order to visualize where all the potential blood drops and blood spatters are? Yes, I looked at all the photographs at one point or another. Well, did you try to determine the significance, if any, between things that appear to be circular drops of blood and things that appear to be other kinds of blood evidence? This is important because he just testified that, according to the blood that he saw, the where the blood was located, that was where she was shot. So he says there were some drips and drops that I think I referred to on direct, but not on any systemic scene-wide basis, no. So he didn't try to determine if there were um, spots in the crime scene that she could have been shot, other than where she was laying. She says, now you testified on direct examination that after hearing Dr. Lawrence, you wished to adopt his mist of blood theory. Is that what you're saying? I don't think I indicated that. I think it was an observation that I had not made, but it's certainly consistent with the physical evidence I see. Well, you don't even know if there is blood mist theory. There is a blood mist testimony by Dr. Lawrence, who admitted he wasn't a blood spatter expert, correct? This is my recollection of his testimony, yes. And you don't know, you haven't done any research to see if Dr. Lawrence is right about this notion of blood misting and settling in some places but not others, do you? I have not done an independent test. That's correct. Let's take a look at shot 12B for a moment since it's up here. Could you give me that exhibit number, Miss Towery? She says, which one? 12B. 12B. So we're making a record here. Ms. Towery says 12B. I don't think I have that one listed. Mr. Gessler says 237. The court says 237. Ms. Abramson says, thank you, Your Honor. Now, I want you to focus on the couch, if you would, at this time, Dr. McCarthy. There are what appear to be loose pillows, loose cushion backs drawn on this couch, correct? Yes. This has to be like such a crude looking drawing, like talking about an oval to represent a foot. So what do these figures look like? Are they stick figures with like ovals for feet? I don't know. Like I'm trying to picture these. I wonder if these are available anywhere. I'm gonna have to do some digging and see if I can find these because that would be helpful. But I think we can all get the picture. Back in the 90s, the technology probably wasn't as good. So these were probably some really crude drawings. So what I'm imagining is just interesting. He says yes. And it's your recollection, is it not, from looking at the photographs that there were similar types of cushions or pillows on the actual couch? Roughly similar. Again, I'm not into couch reconstruction, but it represents them. Yes. Well, this is your couch reconstruction, isn't it? She's great with questions. It diagrammatically represents the couch, but the exact position of the cushions didn't play much of a role in my reconstruction. And they're not much accurate either, are they? Well, I can check them, but I certainly didn't check them for control and accuracy because they played no role. They're just there schematically to be representative of what was there. But didn't the pillows receive damage? Like, wouldn't there be damage, blood spatter, and things like that on the pillows? So wouldn't it be relevant to how the crime scene is set up? Like how everything is laid out? Let's use some photographs that have already been admitted in evidence here and used in this trial, Exhibit 8 and Exhibit 75. Here's Exhibit 8. Do you see that? Yes. Calling your attention to the couch cushions the way they are shown in Exhibit 8, it does not exactly line up with what's shown in Shot 12B, correct? That is correct. And the same is true if you look at it from another angle, which is exhibit number 270 or exhibit 75. What also confirms that the cushions are not lined up on your schematic the same way they are. Do you have some more binder clips in that photograph? Not precisely, no. And you attach no significance to that whatsoever, is that right? That's correct. Please do not attach any significance to the position of the pillows I've shown in my diagram. Well, how about attaching significance to the position of the pillows as they were on the real couch where the real people were, where the real event happened? Do you think that might have significance there? Please do. All right. And in the real photograph, there's a much larger space between Mr. Menendez and a pile of pillows to this right to his right than you show in shot 12B, correct? I'm sorry? I'm sorry. Between Mr. Menendez and a pile of pillows on the real couch, there is a much greater space than this very small space you show on 12B. Yeah, there might be, yeah, there's definitely a few more inches on the actual couch. In fact, this cushion here, which is the first one you show to the right of Mr. Menendez, there really is no such separate cushioning seating next to him. That's correct. It's sort of tucked up more behind the top cushion there. And there's a pile perhaps 3 cushions farther over to the right where you show 2, correct? Yes. On the top of one of those cushions, there's a very extensive blood spatter pattern, isn't there? Yes. Which you are not an expert to analyze and didn't utilize in my reconstruction. Well, it would be relevant in the reconstruction, don't you think? And have no idea whose blood is on that, correct? That's correct. Um, that would be helpful to reconstruct the scene if you know whose blood is where, but I guess not, because then you could line up shots, different shots and where they were standing, but I guess they didn't even go that far, so that's correct. Now, you also can't know, first of all, there's something else on the couch that isn't on your couch at all. There's some smaller, like body propping pillows on the couch, correct? That's correct. And you left them out of your diagrams altogether. Yes, I didn't use them for anything. And you have no idea of why there are, unlike your diagram, why there are 3 cushions piled up about a foot away from Mr. Menendez. That's correct. I have not reconstructed the cushions. Did you ever attempt using your anthropomorphic dummies or anything else to envision how a reclining figure leaning on those cushions with legs up on the cushion would have appeared? No, I didn't attempt to recreate that using the anthropomorphic figures. That is correct. Or any drawing or sketches or anything else. That's correct. Okay, let me now go to 1A. Is it true, Dr. McCarthy, that because you believe that there were 12 rounds fired, you attempt to account for 12, no more or less, in your reconstruction? No, it's just the opposite. As I indicated, I started with the number of wounds and then which far exceed 12, and then looked at which ones appeared to have been related to the same shots and eventually came down to 12. That's convenient. All right, so you came down to 12, so there could have been more. Isn't that true? Is that what you're saying? I don't think it likely. No. All right, well, let's say that. Now, you're saying that the only way, given the laws of physics and biology, the only way that Mrs. Menendez could have received a wound in her left breast is if she was sitting on a couch next to her husband when he was shot. You're not saying that, are you? There's no way on heaven and earth that this woman could have received this wound to her left breast except this way. In this scene, in this sequence, he says. We're not talking about sequence. Uh, recognize we get into a circle. You decide the sequence, you decided number of shots. I want to go outside your sequence and just talk about this as an absolute. And we can do that. I just recognize you are no longer reconstructing this murder because it's the sequence. No. Mr. Khan says, may the witness finish his answer. Ms. Abramson says it's not responsive. The witness says, I'm sorry. The court says the question was argumentative as phrased, so the question is sustained. The answer is stricken. Re-ask the question some other way. Ms. Abramson says, all right, what I want you to do for a moment, if you can, is put aside the sequence you have decided. Can you do that? Put aside my sequence or any sequence. Put aside your sequence or any sequence for the moment, okay? Yes. Having done that, you are not saying, I take it, well, strike that. Are you saying there's no way except what's shown in 1A for Mrs. Menendez to have received pellet wounds to her left breast? The answer to that is a qualified no, as long as no. You're not saying that? I'm not saying that as long as you come up with some other mechanism. Yes, to filter out half the pellets in the shot because we've got a shot on her breast and a grouping that is close. Uh-huh. And there's only, what, 12 pellets there? 14, but that's okay. Objection. Assumes facts not in evidence. The witness says whatever Dr. Lawrence indicated. The court says, wait a minute, the remark of counsel is stricken. All right. The witness says, and there's all that tissue around that's clear. There's all that tissue around that's clear. What? All right. So you're saying it's not a full shot, correct? Oh, that's clear of the wound? Is that what he means? Like there's all that tissue of her that's clear, I guess is what he's saying. She says, you're not saying that it's a full shot, correct? Mr. Khan says, Your Honor, may the witness finish his answer. The court says, had you finished your answer? Ms. Abramson says, if you can stand over by the podium rather than over by the jury, it makes it very awkward, or move away from the jury. It's too close to the jury. So Ms. Abramson is too close to the jury. She says, okay. The trouble is the jury has to see it. The court says, move the other display out of the way. Ms. Abramson says, if the court would inquire, can the jurors see it? The court says the witness won't be able to see it. Ms. Abramson says, you have a small version in front of you. The witness says, thank you, Your Honor. You're right, it is not a full shot. It's more than that. You've got a reasonably well grouped, not a full shot, and you've got a lot of space around on the side, and you've got to filter out half of the shot and still leave a reasonably tight group. So it isn't just that you've got only a partial shot, you've got a pretty rationally grouped partial shot and the rest filtered out. What are you saying, buddy? Were you here for Dr. Lawrence's testimony, all of it? No. Were you here for the part of Dr. Lawrence's testimony who you are relying on that his opinion is that the left elbow shot to Mr. Menendez and the left breast shot to Mrs. Menendez by themselves could be one related shot? Did you hear that testimony? He said that, something of that nature, when I was in the courtroom, so yes. You could just say yes. And that's a shared shot, is it not? That particular postulation would be a shared shot, yes. And he also testified that there was nothing whatsoever from a medical point of view that ruled out that shot, left elbow, left breast, occurring while Mr. and Mrs. Menendez were standing up. Did you hear that? I remember that topic being discussed. I didn't think the answer was quite that simple in my recollection. He definitely said he could not rule out the fact that they might have possibly been standing. He doesn't know. He definitely said that. Next question. You recall that Dr. Lawrence and I were demonstrating, he being Mr. Menendez, me being Mrs. Menendez, just that occurrence where the left elbow shared a shot with the left breast. Do you remember seeing that, or perhaps you didn't? I don't remember seeing it, but I remember some discussion of that nature. The question is, do you remember seeing that when the two of us stood there and he demonstrated how the left elbow and the left breast could have shared one shot? Do you remember seeing that? I guess my recollection is you folks were starting to do some sort of demonstration and I had to leave for some reason. So your answer is no. I don't recollect seeing it. But with respect to my question now, it's true, is it not, that there are other ways? If we are focusing solely on the left breast shot, there are other ways in which Mrs. Menendez could have received that shot than the one that you put in shot one, correct? If we decouple from the scene and this sequence, you could filter another means. What does that even mean? All right. Now, with respect to wounds to Mr. Menendez's right arm, there is nothing from the testimony of Dr. Lawrence. There is nothing from Dr. Golden, and there's nothing in the laws of nature, as I understand them, that indicates that for a man to receive a wound to his right arm, whichever is the entry and whichever is the exit, he has to be seated on a couch next to his wife. There's nothing that says that. Decoupled from this scene and this sequence, you are correct. What does that mean? I understand he's trying to say, like, he's trying to make it seem like you're taking one little piece and not looking at the whole big picture, but you can't look at the whole big picture and not look at all the pieces. She's trying to break it down and be like, but you're missing pieces in your whole big picture. And going back to the wound on the left elbow, the same is true. There's nothing in the laws of nature that say that for a man to receive a wound to his left elbow, he has to be seated on a couch with the elbow on his armrest. Decoupled from the scene in the sequence, you are correct. So he's just going to keep repeating the same nonsensical BS to answer these questions, which I think is a bunch of garbage. In his arm on the armrest, is his arm on the armrest, by the way? I'd have to look. I don't think so. There wasn't any blood on the armrest. So then why do you show it on the armrest if it wasn't there? Mr. Khan says, assumes facts, not an evidence that that arm was on the armrest. The court says, sustained. Ms. Abramson says, are you meaning to show the jury that his arm is on the armrest as it appears in shot 1A? Mr. Khan says, it's argumentative as phrased that it appears that way. The court says, sustained. Why don't you get down and look at it then? The witness says, I'm sorry, Your Honor, you were concerned. Okay. What? Ms. Emerson says, I hate witnesses that like suck up to the judge. Ms. And he's doing that. And he's also being evasive. I hate witnesses that are evasive and don't want to answer questions. They can't just say yes or no. They have to give a long-winded explanation. This is all of what's not to be a good witness. He's got all of the check marks. Ms. Amerson says, I put 1B up just to make it clearer. The witness says yes. 1B shows the arm of the armrest, doesn't it? No. Let me put it this way. There's nothing in my reconstruction that requires the arm being on the armrest. Were you talking about your reconstruction or are you talking about your illustrations, or are they the same? I don't think the illustrations show it on the armrest either, but see, I think the arm is over the armrest. I don't think the illustrations show it either, but it's certainly not part of my reconstruction. So, if the illustration you have in your hand right now, which is 1B, and I will look behind it, and 251, now 251 seem to give the impression visually that the arm is on the armrest because the line of the back of the armrest doesn't seems to intersect here with the elbow, doesn't it? Objection argumentative as phrased. Sustained. Does the line seem to intersect with the elbow? Not to me because I print these out. So you get a little perspective and you can see that the arm is not intended to be on the armrest. But I mean, well, why don't you put 1B back up? Sure. Let the record show when you were pointing and saying it is not intended to be on the armrest, you had removed 1B and were pointing to 1A, correct? Different angle. Well, let's talk about this angle, the angle of 1B. Yes, it does give this appearance that the arm was on the armrest. Again, not by me, or not to me. So it's misleading because there's not objection, assumes facts, not an evidence, sustained. Is it misleading? Illustration 1B. In my opinion, no. It's not misleading. That's correct. How far above the armrest do you intend the arm to be? I can't tell you how far above precisely. I don't believe it was on, but I can't position that 1 inch or 2 inches or 3 inches. The evidence doesn't present. So we have someone sitting on a couch with his arm raised in that right. Is that right? And it's not resting on the armrest. It's just floating in the air? Objection, argumentative as phrased. Sustained. Are you meaning in your intention to convey that Mr. Menendez is sitting on the couch and he's got his arm bent, but he's not resting it on the armrest? Is that what you mean to convey? No, I mean to convey that he has raised his arm, I believe. In a sort of shielding maneuver? Objection, Your Honor, non-responsive. Oh, he said that. No, wait. Objection, non-responsive, and it's a conclusion, speculation. I'd ask for it to be stricken. That he raised his arm? Maybe. Overruled, he's responding to your question. Okay, go ahead. The witness says he is in a shielding maneuver. Oh, so that he said that, but the court reporter didn't get that. Like he raised his arm like in a shielding maneuver. And then she asked him to clarify that. She says, we'll play that game. Objection. Counsel, let's not make these remarks. It's inappropriate and not professional. Ms. Abramson says, why don't you recreate what you just did? Show us the arm, show us the position. I want to describe what you're doing. Do it again. You're leaning towards your right. Is that correct? Mr. Khan says, Your Honor, may the witness finish his answer as he demonstrated. The court says, he was in the process of doing it when you interrupted him, counsel. Just let him answer the question. Ms. Averson says, answer the question. The witness says, yes, I believe he was raising his arm, I postulate, because of the way it lines up with his right arm wound, that he raises his arm, he leans to the right in a position that would shield Mary behind him more, so it would be a natural maneuver, and he takes the shot in the left arm. And of course, you did not illustrate any of those body positions that you just demonstrated on these charts, did you? Just yes or no? I can't illustrate all that detail on these charts, so the answer is no. So now you're saying his arm is up and his shoulder is down. Is that correct? No, I mean, I can't do it that precisely for you for the evidence, but I believe it's this sort of maneuver. Well, why don't you just say frozen and we'll describe what the movement looks like. You're dipping your right shoulder down, raising your arm up so that the hand is parallel with your chin, right? I can't do this precisely for you. Do it again. You won't even answer if your hand is in front of your chin. Do you see your hand in front of your chin? Yes, but what I don't want to do, if I could reconstruct the position of everybody to this position, I would have done it already. Dr. McCarthy, what you don't want me to do is pin you down. Isn't that true? Objection, argumentative, sustained. Do you want me, do you want to be pinned down, Dr. McCarthy? I don't want to communicate to the jury details that I can't infer from the remaining evidence. So you can't infer from the evidence the detail you put on these diagrams, can you? You just arbitrarily put it down. Some detail is arbitrarily placed, and I tried to indicate that which perhaps someone might attach significance to, but was arbitrary in my diagrams. I want you to retake the position that you think, in fact, was the position that Mr. Menendez was in when he received the elbow wound, because I haven't completed describing it for you for the record. Would you please do that again? It doesn't require an answer. Could you please do it? The court says he's already said he can't be precise. Ms. Abramson says he's demonstrating. The court says, counsel, let's not argue. You asked him simply to illustrate something, but he says there is no precise way he can do that. Ms. Abramson says he assumed the posture before I asked him to demonstrate anything. When he was answering questions, he lifted his elbow, dropped his right shoulder before I asked him anything, and all I'm trying to do is capture it for the record. The court says he's qualified that this is not a precise demonstration, so it's meaningless to describe. Well, then aren't all of his diagrams meaningless if he's already said that they're not precise? If we're going to do that game, Judge, then none of his testimony should come in because he's not precise. Ms. Abramson says, now, are you now saying that even what you were just demonstrating, that's not accurate? We shouldn't pay any attention to it. Is that what you're saying? No. You asked me what I thought. You asked me if I thought he was just sort of sitting there floating above the armrest, and I said no. I thought he was attempting to do something more like this. He demonstrates again, raising his arm, shielding, but I can't do that precise position because depending on where you put her, depending on where you put the shooter, the position is changed. Do it again. You just did it again automatically. Now your left hand is up, sort of parallel with your chin and mouth. Is that what you're showing right now? That's all I'm asking you. You've got a better view than me. That's what it looks like from here. Yes. So you've got your right shoulder dipped down, correct? Yes. And you've got your right arm bent and your right hand resting about opposite, about 2 inches below the knot of your tie. Is that right? Mr. Khan says, I object under 352 in light of the witness testimony that he is not accurately portraying his position. He's prepared illustrations which indicate the positions he's seeking to present. Ms. Abramson says, his position is that it is. All I'm trying to do is translate for the record. The jury sees it, the record doesn't. The court says, again, you have described it as much as it needs to be described. Your next question, please. Okay. So, in spite of the fact, now let's do this again with the right arm dipped right and the left arm up. The court says we've been through this already. Ms. Abramson says I'm just trying to show. The court says, counsel, let's go on to something else because you're asking him to do something he says he can't do. Ms. Abramson says I'm asking him why he's decided to do this instead. Court says let's not get into a discussion. He was just answering the question. Oh my God, this is so inappropriate for the judge to like go back and forth with the attorney um in front of the jury. It's bad. I like it makes the attorney look bad and she's trying to get a point across and the judge is not having anything to do with it and she's got to make this point. It's important for her case. So this is infuriating. Ms. Amerson says, "What's the angle of the trajectory that you're showing in 1A?" I don't know the precise angle on that diagram, but I can reconstruct for you the precise angle. And what is the angle on the diagram you drew? I don't recall it from memory. And this does not show. Well, does it have a downward angle, an upward angle? Can you tell me at least that as much? That much? At least that much? Sorry. Yes, I believe it does appear to be at a slight downward angle. I think that's correct. Well, if the body was in the position that you're demonstrating and went through the same places of the bodies that you're showing, that would have a much more dramatically downward angle than what you've illustrated on 1A, wouldn't it? I wouldn't say much more dramatically. Depending on how you position the body, the angle will change. So there's no indication, is there, that the breast wounds to Mrs. Menendez have a downward angle? Is there? That's a great point. She was standing. So they weren't done when she was like sitting on the floor or coming down from a less uh, downward angle, meaning like somebody standing above her while she was sitting on the couch. If it was more straight on versus a little bit of a downward angle, that might give you some idea of where she was positioned. So she's making some good points here. She's really, I think, for the defense, she's making a lot of really good points. She says there's no indication, is there, that the breast wounds to Mrs. Menendez have a downward angle? Is there? He says the autopsy report says what it says, but there's no indication of a dramatic downward angle. There's no indication of any downward angle in the autopsy reports. Isn't that true, Dr. McCarthy? I don't recollect any discussion, and thus that's why there's a very mild one here. Well, I don't know what you mean by recollected discussion. I'm talking about an autopsy report, not a discussion, okay? Are we clear on that? Yes, but I can't remember the specific word. If the coroner, you have it. Why don't you look? Yeah, I will. Thank you. They're so. This is like this is entertainment. I mean, I'm sorry guys, but this I said this in the last one. Drama, courtroom drama to me is more entertaining than real life. Or I'm sorry, the real life courtroom drama is more entertaining to me than like anything on TV, fictional or otherwise, because I find it so hilarious. Like you have to be on your best professional behavior, but yet people don't, and you have people like this guy who just can't he can't answer any question just with a straight up yes, no, whatever. Like he's got to give 1,000 words per answer, and it's ridiculous. She says, "Why don't you try 6, page 7? This particular topic is in the next to the last paragraph on page 8 of this wound of 6." What? Yes, he says, wound 6, page 8. Without measurable angulation, he's not saying 0. Well, this is what the paragraph says, is it not? Answer, who can, and then she cuts him off. She says, quote, there is a hemorrhage along the entire wound path as described. The trajectory is front to back and left to right. So basically on a parallel level with whoever was standing there with a gun without measurable angulation, upward or downward. So no upward or downward angulation either. This is all very important about this breast wound. He says correct. So that means horizontal, doesn't it? Yes, more or less. He just cannot answer an effing question. So there was no angulation downward inside the body as dissected by the coroner, correct? Objection misstates the testimony and assumes facts not in evidence. Overruled. The witness says there was no angulation significant enough possibly to measure. He just can't say he was wrong. So what you're showing, which is a tipping of Mr. Menendez's shoulder and the shot coming downward, is significant angulation, isn't it? Objection assumes facts not in evidence, which is what that position represents. The court says it's argumentative as phrased. Now, did you have your computer rescale Mrs. Menendez's size yesterday as you were planning on doing? No, we attempted to look at the autopsy photographs to see if we had one with a complete body shot. We do not. So what we'll have to do if we're going to scale is we've got parts of her body in different positions, and we would have to see if we've got a sequence where she was shot moving and dither and reconstruct, and I don't have that software. Is that a no? That's the answer to your question. So no, sir. That's all you had to say. No. Did it occur to you that someone should just ask her brother or sister or someone who knows her and find out how tall she is, or is that too simple? Objection argumentative sustained. Did you have her drawn Did you have drawn shot 1A as entering Mrs. Menendez's left chest basically from the side of the breast the way it's drawn right there, correct? Yes. And you have her what, sitting on a cushion? Sitting on the couch. Floating on the couch, actually, isn't it? Isn't she? No, it's difficult to float on a couch. The representation is to have her sitting on the couch. Well, the way she's drawn there, she is artificially raised up on the couch, isn't she? I guess the answer occurs to me not if she's 5'8". I don't think she's artificially elevated on the couch, even if she's drawn as shown. Well, the purpose of this line that you've drawn and positioning the figures the way they are positioned is to show that it's possible for all these wounds to communicate along a straight line, isn't it? Well, I mean, it's to demonstrate that they, in my reconstruction, do communicate in a straight line. So, yes. This is to demonstrate that there's a straight line that connects the left elbow, the right arm, or Mrs. Menendez, and the left breast of Mrs. Menendez. Yes, this certainly is. So the bodies sort of have to be lined up in a way to show that. Well, lined up in a way, or could the bodies all be lined slightly different positions in the actual scene? Surely. Your Honor, I have one of these illustrations in smaller form. I'd like to mark it next in evidence. Court says, haven't they already been marked, so we're just getting into a duplication? Ms. Abramson says, not this one. The court says it wasn't used in testimony. This has a line drawn in it that doesn't exist yet. May I see it? Can you see it? The court says 294 is the next exhibit number. Ms. Abramson says, thank you, Your Honor. This appears, does it not, Mr. McCarthy, to be a smaller duplicate of your shot number 1A, but it has a line drawn along the edge of the couch cushion. You see that line drawn by computer? It has an edge on it, yes. I just can't verify in terms of the couch cushion where it's drawn. You see there's an edge to the couch cushion in your large illustration. If you go from this point, is which is this corner, to the point which is this corner, you can draw a straight line across that edge. Surely. Why don't you just perhaps, Mr. Levin, you can move that illustration back, get some space to the witness, so that the witness doesn't have to get up and the jury can see it as well. Now you see, if you connect those, by the way, that's how you drew your trajectory lines. You picked 2 points and you asked the computer to connect them with a straight line, correct? That's one way you could do it. I think we just basically moved the line and the figures independently. So you just had a line that you could move and tilt and tip. A line and free space, a bar. That bar is an object to the computer. It just thinks that's part of the scene. It isn't the computer doing geometrics from one vector to the other. That's correct. So you can do that on a computer. You can tell it to go from this point to that point in a straight line. Absolutely. And you see here that such a straight line is drawn. Appear so, yes. And you see that in this straight line drawn, somehow her body, her knees are floating above the cushion, the couch cushion, the base of the couch, correct? No, in this placement, we'd have to get shot 1B. I want to talk about this for the moment. Her knee is here, and the edge of the cushion is below it. The edge of the cushion the edge of the cushion lines up with his knees and the way that you've drawn it. Yes, So did you intend to have her sitting on this pillow, that piece of the pillow shown underneath her bottom? She's illustrated like that in the illustration, sitting on a pillow. So she's either sitting on a pillow or floating above the bottom of it. Again, I'd have to look at the other shot to answer your question about her knees and geometry. She's shown that they're clearly sitting. Since we have already established there is no pillow, she can't be seated on one, correct? That is correct. She can't. And putting her on a pillow and putting her up at this angle simply lines the breast up better with the right arm, doesn't it? I mean, it lines up in this geometry, but I could have folded her knees under her and lined it up. There's any number of ways she could have been for the original shot. But that's the way you did it. But that's the way you do it to line her up, so it would look like it connected. That's the way this illustration is shown. That's correct. Now, we were talking yesterday, you, Mr. Gessler mainly, and myself a little, about all these test firings you did. And the purpose originally was to try to find a distribution pattern so you could do some distance calculations. Is that right? It would assist me in distance reconstruction. Yes. Are you familiar with the literature concerning how shot pellets emit from the barrel of shotguns generally? I think I am. And generally speaking, isn't it true that the pellets form a pattern that's ever widening, the farther away from the target the muzzle of the gun is? When you're talking about the ultimate contact pattern, yes. In point of fact, the literature teaches that the pellets emerge from the shotgun and assume two drops that are also expanding, if you will, conically, as you alluded in a cone shape, um, as you alluded to earlier in the case. But in point of fact, the lead pellets that led the shot group actually, because they're plowing the undisturbed air first, become retarded and then move back through the shot group, and then the shot group assumes once they get spread out there isn't a flowing effect from the leaders, and the column goes out as two groups in a widening pattern, but it's not quite, it's just a clean expanding cone, and that's some of the literature. What's the space between the two groups? A foot? Now you got me there. Well, is that a space? It's a few inches. From my recollection, I don't know if that it's a foot. But the importance of that is that when the shot moves back through from the column destabilizes into two parts, and the pellets are non-symmetric. They don't have to take a precisely linear path, and you don't make precisely a linear cone. The flight of the shot column is not a simple thing. The question was, at a greater distance, there's a wider pattern of distribution of pellets. Can you answer that? Yes or no? Generally. Generally, yes? Yes. Is there a range generally accepted in the acceptable scientific literature of when it is that the pellets even separate from one solid column into individual pellets with spaces between them? There are, if you know. Ranges of pellets spread published in the literature as a function of distance down range. They have huge spreads on them. Generally, everybody agrees there isn't much spread before you get outside the barrel, but after you get outside the barrel, depending on the construction of the shot shell, the rate of expansion can vary significantly and dramatically between ammunition types. So, you're saying there is no generally accepted spread range outside the barrel in the literature. Is that what you're saying? There are generally used formulas for spread in the literature, but any detailed studies show that they're remarkably inaccurate for a particular shot and round. That means you are completely incapable of predicting whether or not there is a spread in 1, 2, 3, 10-foot, or 50-foot, anything. No, it is not the case that you are completely incapable. You could even perhaps calculate a nominal, but you would have to admit a distribution around it. That is, you think this nominally, this is a spread consistent with 5 feet, but depending on the round in the shot, it may be 2.5 or 7.5 sort of discussion. Do you understand what I mean? Now, you did your test firings, discern, however, non-uniform. There was a distance in the spread between 6 feet and 12 feet, correct? Oh, clearly there is more spread at 12 feet than 6 feet. Oh, good, there is more spread at 12 feet than 6. Generally, you would. Again, yes, not always, but most of the time. Not always? Not always. You will have shots, and I could show some of my targets where the spread at 12 feet from a tight group will be smaller than the spread at 6 feet from a large group. I'd like to see those, please, because I don't believe you. With the same ammunition and same gun? I'm absolutely certain you would get that with the same rounds and same gun. So you didn't get that here, though. I got very close, as I can illustrate for you. Go ahead, illustrate for me how your 12-foot is smaller than your 6. Objection misstates the testimony that it is smaller. Ms. Abramson says, well, that's what he said with the Fiachi ammunition. The witness says, I've given up my targets, but I think I have copies. Hang on. The court says, let's just use the exhibits, then we'll do that at 1:30. Ms. Abramson says, thank you, Your Honor. The court says we'll be in recess. Noon proceedings were adjourned until 1:30, and we will come back tomorrow with a continuation of his testimony. So there you have it. He is, again, being evasive, not answering questions, being really annoying, in my opinion. Dr. McCarthy is not my favorite witness. It's hard enough to get through technical testimony, and he's not even saying words that make sense altogether. He's just like throwing out a bunch of word salad, and his evasiveness with the questions, like he just can't answer a simple yes or no, is beyond annoying to me. If I was a juror, I would get so irritated with witnesses like this. And if I was a lawyer and I had to question them, oh my God, I would lose my sanity and be locked in prison, I'm sure, because there's no way I could deal with a witness like this who just would not answer the questions. And like, I would have a hard time keeping my cool. But I like Leslie's little, like, she gets sassy with him, and I like it, even though the judge admonishes her sometimes. But she does kind of get away with it for the most part. So even though like the state might object, but she still gets to do it, and he doesn't really. The judge is just like, okay, ignore it, whatever. Like that's really not a punishment. So at least she kind of gets her digs in while she's there, which I love her for. Leslie is like one of my girl crush heroes. I don't know, Leslie and Dr. Oh my God, I'm blanking on her name right now. She testified in trial one. Why can I not remember her name? She's like the nurse with the psych. Oh my God, Doctor. This is gonna bother me. Why can't I think of her name? She's got a show now on Hulu. Hold on. Ann Burgess, Dr. Ann Burgess. I can't believe I forgot her name. I was just blanking for a minute. I'm brain dead today. But Dr. Ann Burgess, who is like world renowned. She's trained the FBI on a lot of this stuff, on victim survive surviving victimhood, surviving, victimology, all that. Like she teaches victimology. She's amazing, and I believe she does testify. I can't wait to get to her and the other experts. Those are the good experts where you actually like you can't wait to hear what they're saying because you're learning. This guy, I'm not learning anything from his testimony other than he's an argumentative prick. Sorry for my language, but that's kind of how I'm seeing him. So that's where I leave you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. We'll be back tomorrow with more from this insufferable Dr. McCarthy. Thank you guys. Hit the like button, and I'll see you then. Take care. Bye now.